Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset. I'm your host, Michael Hingson. We're glad that you're here with us. You know, when we started Unstoppable Mindset back in 2021, it was all about people having the opportunity to come on and tell their stories, to talk about things they've done, why they did what they did, challenges they faced. And my whole thought was, and still is, we want people who come on to help show that anyone who comes to the podcast and listens to it or watches it realizes that they're more unstoppable than they think they are, because we tend to underrate ourselves. Well, anyway, people tell stories of all sorts, and true to form, our guest today, Chanoa Inez, will do the same. Her story, I guess in a sense, I would say like mine, has some interesting twists and turns. Not the same, though. She was not in the World Trade Center on September 11th, but she does have twists and she does have turns. And I think everyone does to one degree or another. And the point is how we overcome them and how we deal with them. And we're going to hear all about that today. So, Chanoa, I want to welcome you to Unstoppable Mindset, and we're glad you're here.
Thank you for having me, Michael. I'm glad to be here.
And Chanoa isn't all that far away from me. She's down in the Los Angeles area. We live up in a town called Victorville. So I don't have enough of a pitching arm to throw a baseball so she could reach out her window and catch it, because she's much lower than we are. But she's still closer than a lot of the people we've talked to. So there you go. Well, anyway, Chanoa, why don't we start kind of well, actually, I want to start in a different way. Chanoa, that's an interesting name. Where did that come from?
um, it's an interesting story. My mother liked the name Chanel, but around the time I was born, a lot of babies were being named Chanel. So she came up with Chanoa, and she thought she made it up. Like she thought I was the first Chanoa. But years later, she stumbled across Chanoa spelled with an S, and it's actually a Native American name. There might be an H at the end, although I have discovered recently, over the last few years, two other Chanoas with a C, but that's it. So,
Wow.
um, yeah, and it means white dove of peace. So it's interesting. It's still a rare name. I think I'm still the first person who pops up if you Google Chanoa.
I was just going to ask that. So the other two that you found, Chanoa with a C, are they younger?
No. One is about 10 years older than me, maybe 15, and the other one's a few years older than me.
Well, still, it is a very rare name. As I was
Yes.
telling you, I've never thought that many people had Michael Hingson, but I was recently at a Marriott hotel and wanted to put my Marriott number into my record, and we discovered that there are four Michael Hinksons who are also Marriott Rewards members. So there you go. Well, it's okay. It doesn't change my opinion, and it doesn't bother my ego to have other Michael Hinksons in the world. It's okay.
That's great.
It's kind of fun. Well, tell us, if you would, a little about the early Chanoa growing up and all that sort of thing.
Um, hmm. In many ways, I am like I am today. I was like how I am today. Uh, I was a big reader. Um, any trip to the bookstore was a special treat because I knew I'd be leaving with something, and I knew all of the librarians. So I would leave the library with a couple of bags full of books. A lot imagination was a big thing in my life. Me and my friends would come up with really original games all centered around our imagination. And what else? I was very much the girly girl, but I was also very sporty. So I was as happy with capture the flag as, going to play with dolls with my friends. So I had a very active and very well-rounded social group as a child.
What did your parents think about that?
They liked it. I mean, actually, my mother basically, there was an unspoken rule in the house that every child had to play soccer. So
Oh,
the good thing is I did love it. My sister played it for the shortest amount of time, but because she found her passion in tennis.
mm. Well, that's still a sport. That's fair.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's a
how many
great sport.
siblings did you have?
Um, two immediate siblings. I have more siblings from my father's side, but grew up with two siblings. I'm the oldest.
Uh-huh. But the youngest, Chanoa. Oh, well, that's okay. So where did you grow up?
Um, Westchester County, New York.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I really
A long
loved
way
it
to go.
there. I had a great group of friends, some of whom I'm still in touch with. Well, one of whom now, after all these years. And then I moved to South Florida when I was about 9 years old.
What prompted that?
My family, it was a family decision. I wanted to
Mhm.
stay in New York.
Yeah.
I was a Girl Scout, and I actually quit the Girl Scouts when we moved to Florida because they didn't wear the uniforms. They had shorts and t-shirts, and
Ah.
so I opted out.
Oh, well, and never did rejoin, huh?
No, I did not.
Okay. But you moved to Florida and you must have gotten to the point where you tolerated or liked it.
Um, it definitely has its pluses growing up, being near the beach and then as a young adult living in South Beach, there's a lot to do, but I wouldn't say it was on the top of my list.
Yeah. I've been to South Beach a couple of times and participated as a speaker in the South Beach Jazz Festival
Oh,
several years ago. And it was a good time to go because it was warm there, but it was not the summertime when it was hot, humid, and full of mosquitoes. So it was enjoyable to be there, which was a lot of fun. And walked around, which was always enjoyable because a lot of places are not necessarily prone to being able to walk around and experience things, but a lot of stuff in South Beach is close together. So walking around worked out very well as far as I was concerned.
yes, I have to admit, yeah, that was one of the better, that was one of my favorite things about living in South Beach. Just 28 blocks. And I remembered sometimes my car would be parked for like a week. If I didn't leave South Beach, there was no reason to move it. That was nice. It's kind of like a village.
Yeah. And people were friendly and it was very enjoyable to go there. So I enjoyed it, but I'm not sure I want to be there in the summer. As I said, all the humidity and all the other things about Florida that tend to be a little bit more of a challenge, but that's okay. But I enjoy going to Florida and I've been there a number of times. And for a number of years, the National Federation of the Blind has had its convention in Orlando in
Oh,
July, which
okay.
was fun. A lot of rain, but that's okay.
Yeah, I love going to Miami as a tourist. Every time I go to visit family or friends, I always enjoy it. It's just not my choice for home.
For home. So, did you go to college in Florida or what did you do?
I did, yeah. I studied fashion merchandising. Unfortunately, the university closed 2 years ago, but it was Miami International University of Art and Design, and I just love the program. I basically studied everything in the fashion business besides design. There were design majors at my school, but that's outside of my wheelhouse. Public relations, copywriting, store design, marketing, styling, you name it.
Why did you study that? An interesting field. Why did you, or what caused you to want to take that up?
I've loved fashion since forever. Uh, Growing up, I used to annotate my magazines. It was like to another level. Nobody could, look at my fashion magazines before I was done reading them because I had
Hmm.
like a whole system. When I was done, they could use it. So I was interested in it, and it's funny because my best friend in high school, she intended to do that major, and I never heard of fashion merchandising before, and she had explained it to me. I was actually pre-med, and I left school early because I realized I didn't want to be in Florida or like dependent on my parents for 10 years.
Yeah.
So I came out, took a year or two off from school, and I ended up stumbling upon fashion merchandising, which is funny. And my best friend in high school who intended to study that actually studied something completely different. So interesting turn of events.
So it had nothing to do with the fact that Chanoa is fairly close to Chanel, huh?
No, no.
Okay, just checking. No, I understand. Well, that's cool. So you studied it. Did you get advanced degrees or just a bachelor's or what?
Bachelor. They didn't
Uh-huh.
have a master's
Advanced degrees.
program.
Hmm.
if they did, I probably would have done it. It was just a really amazing school. We had, top of the line equipment. All of our professors were actually professionals in their fields and still working in their fields. And I'm still connected with some of them. In fact, one of my professors was one of my first clients when I started my copywriting business, and then we worked together in other capacities later on in my business.
Wow. So after you graduated, what did you do?
After graduation, well, I graduated during the Great Recession.
Hmm.
So I did not go into a fashion job right away. I continued working in nightlife in South Beach, and I stumbled upon like this whole, newish world of getting paid to write blog posts, which, my internship during college was at a magazine, and I wrote a lot for their blog. So I thought that was interesting. And when I just was like kind of looking online to see what's out there, fashion related opportunities, I stumbled upon these freelance writing opportunities, and I started writing for luxury real estate companies. I started covering fashion and lifestyle for Miami CBS Local, and so it was like a nice side gig incorporating copywriting, marketing, and my fashion background.
Okay. And so how long did you do that?
Um, I started doing that. Let's see. Well, that was already a few. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's already like, um, what? That was a couple of years after I graduated. Before that, I actually started a company in fashion with a friend of mine while I was still in college.
Hmm.
But we wound that down about a year after because it was just actually starting to grow then, but it was growing a little too slowly. So maybe my business partner had to like move into something else. Um, but it was great. It was called Global Fashion Scout, and we represented emerging fashion designers. And so we'd go to major fashion trade shows and help them get accounts. We also we did a lot of the things together, but I also like my specialty in our business was also the basically editorial side also. So we'd also cover the fashion industry, and we'd give coverage to the designers we represented. So that was a lot of fun. And actually that friend, she runs a fashion tech startup now. So she ended up getting back into the field.
Clearly, though, your entrepreneurial spirit was starting to emerge.
It was, yes.
So you did that. You wound down the company. Then you went into the other thing that you were talking about. And how long did you do that?
um, the copywriting
Hmm.
business. I still have my copywriting business on the side now. And it is, wow. I started it as a side gig in 2011 and full time since 2012.
Okay. And so you copyright primarily in the fashion industry, or what?
That used to be my primary focus. Now it's tech, fintech, and luxury companies. So that still includes a lot of fashion companies. I've had clients who span all three spaces. They have every industry now touches the tech industry, but I've served clients who basically provide tech software as a service on the business to business side, and then even some that were actual payments companies, and that was integrated into their products.
Hmm. And so what exactly do you do?
As a copywriter,
Hmm.
yeah. So I help businesses market and sell their services, and that can be like from messaging strategy. It can be the when you go to a website, what do you read on a landing page? It can be email copy, it can be ads. There's a lot that's involved, but if you just think about like marketing and selling in terms of words, give me video scripts, etc.
So you help create brands also,
Um,
or at
I
least you
do,
help
but
bring the
from the
brands to the
brand,
public.
no, I do, but not. I wouldn't consider myself a branding strategist. What I do is part of my job is that like I can help brands, startups develop their brand foundations and develop their brand voice and tone, which is one of my specialties.
Hmm. But otherwise, you help bring whatever brand they have to the public so that the public becomes more aware of them, obviously.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a cool thing. Now, where did you live, or where were you when you started this and when you were doing this?
Um, I started in Miami, and I started with fashion, just first blog posts, and then I was actually doing some fashion journalism, lifestyle journalism. But when I got into copywriting, actually, my first client ended up being the CEO of the nightlife corporation I was working for. He was opening a restaurant brand, and he asked me to do the copywriting.
Mm.
So that was great. So it was my first clip, and then I loved it more than anything. And eventually, after a few years, I mostly evolved away from the journalistic side and just did like pure copywriting. And then years later, I got into the strategy side.
Okay. And you did most of this down in Florida, or when did you move out to California?
I moved to LA. It was almost 2019, like the very
Okay.
end of the year of
Right.
2018. Yeah.
Well, we probably should go back. So in 2011, you started this and all, um, but then you had twists and turns in your life, as we know, and as you mentioned in your bio. Do you want to talk about some of that?
Sure. Yeah. So I moved to LA from Montenegro, and
Now that
um,
was quite a switch. So what got you to Montenegro, and how did all that come about?
yeah. So when I was still living in South Beach, well, North Beach at that time, my boyfriend, we lived together. He was from Montenegro. And, you know, before I'd ever been there, I loved the language and I had so much, I was so interested in the culture and I just couldn't wait to go. And so I started learning a few words here and there. And then when I finally went there on vacation, I I I was so happy with the trip that, you know, I came back and I fell into this like deep slump. I just everyone like saw pictures from my vacation and they wanted to know about it and I didn't want to talk about it. So I was like pretty, you know, I knew that I didn't want to stay in Miami before that. I just didn't know where I wanted to move to, so I didn't feel a sense of urgency. But the contrast was pretty dramatic for me at the time.
I'll bet.
So yeah, so my boyfriend was he just switched careers, and so he was like a newish yacht broker, and that's a business that can definitely run there. They have the seacoast in Croatia and Montenegro. So he said he loved the idea of going there. So he's suggested we go back the next summer to stay the whole summer, put our things in storage, and then stay to work. And if it doesn't work out work-wise, or we just want to come back, then we come back. So it's not like a permanent commitment. And so that's what we did. The next summer, I wrapped up my day job, and then I had this intention he was going to do, obviously, his work from over there with the same yacht brokerage in Fort Lauderdale. He'd just be like, their European man on the ground. And I was going to build this side gig freelance writing business to be my full-time career.
Which you could certainly do from Montenegro as well as the United States.
Absolutely. And then I wouldn't have to worry about, getting hired in a foreign country, especially with, different cost of living and standards and stuff like that than the US.
Right. So this was now 2012, right?
Yes. So this is the
Okay.
summer of 2012. And so we flew to Serbia first. So we were there for a day or two, and then flew to Montenegro. And we spent the day with his parents, and it was just amazing. And then we went to the seacoast to this seaside city that our friend was generous enough to lend us his apartment. And the apartment was huge. So we were trying to convince his parents to come spend time with us because the capital of Montenegro, Podgorica, it's like Rome in the summer, which is just like, it's hard to breathe. It's just very dry and hot. But we just had like an amazing time. I remember thinking that night that it was the first time up until that point in my life that everything felt perfect. And I was just so grateful and cloud nine. But unfortunately, when I woke up in the morning, I discovered that he'd passed away in the night. He passed away in his sleep from a clot. And my world at the time was just like upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I said, definitely a twist. And
Yeah.
so that clearly was a challenge. You're in a foreign country, although you had been there once before, but still in a foreign country. He passed away. What did you do?
Um, well, I mean, it was very complicated from the start. First, I was just in shock, just kind of like
Hmm.
walking around, like, what do I do? And then I didn't know what to do because I knew about 100 words of the language. I didn't know the word for help, you know? So I decided to just throw the balcony doors open. There's like a square downstairs. And I just said help. I started calling for help in English and hoping somebody understood. And people were just like, you know, in their swim gear and getting ready to go to the beach. And they were looking up like very confused. And thankfully, this high school student was staying in the unit below with her family. And she spoke perfect English. So she came running up with her mother and they helped me out and to like, you know, call the medics and everything like that.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it was hard then, you know, calling obviously his family and everything like that. But, you know, I was very young, and not to say that that's not a difficult situation. It definitely is at any age, but I was not very resilient, you know. I really, I think I did not measure my emotions enough. So it was more traumatizing than
Yeah.
it needed to be. Yeah.
Well, but you had not had any expectation, nor did you really prepare for something like that, which you know, is understandable. But you did eventually work through it. How were his parents when you told them?
Oh, I mean, as distraught as you can imagine. You know, he was a wonderful man, and it was really hard. You know, parents don't usually expect to outlive
No,
their children.
no. But how did they treat you and deal with you?
Oh, they were nothing but wonderful. His father has since passed away, but you know, I decided to stay in Montenegro, and there, because he was Orthodox Christian. I was too. I just no longer am practicing religion, but I was not then, but I was afterwards.
Hmm.
There's a certain rituals. So there's like the time that you're gathering before the funeral, and then there's something that happens like 3 days later after the funeral, and then there's something 40 days later. So staying in Europe allowed me to be there for those important dates. And then, of course, his family came from the US, from Florida. So I got to, you know, I spent a lot of quality time with his family during that time, which helped, I think, all of us. But yeah, they've been nothing but wonderful. His mother is still living in Montenegro. Yeah.
So did you well, obviously that gave you an opportunity to start to heal, and time can help. Were you doing any copywriting during any of that time?
Very little.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, very little.
It was more about
More,
healing and processing.
yeah, it was towards the end of the summer that I then started thinking about building business, and got some new clients before I flew to the US to organize our effects and everything, and then to fly back. At which point I ended up moving to Belgrade on the advice of my friends who thought I'd be bored in the off season in Montenegro.
Well,
So I ended up living basically between like half the year in Belgrade and half the year on the seacoast in Montenegro for the first 2 years. And then I lived only in Montenegro for a total, I was like 6.5 years in the Balkans.
okay. And So eventually you were able to start your business, and again, I would think use that as a way to help bring a little bit more stability to your world.
Yeah, yeah. I know the pressure was not that high in the beginning there because
Right.
the cost of living was so dramatically different. It's higher now there, but that helped. I was really just importantly focusing on trying to get myself back on track. It was
Right.
a lot. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of a real major undertaking when your your significant other, if you will, who you were clearly very close to, suddenly passes away and nobody expects that. And then you have to deal with all of that. But I'm
Mhm.
glad that the pressure wasn't so great in any way that you couldn't deal with it. And I'm kind of a believer that we can handle whatever comes along if we focus and work at it. And you clearly were able to do that.
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah.
I won't say it was so easy. It was not. It was a long, dark period with a lot of times that, strangely, a lot of like good times in between, or at least thankfully.
Yeah. So, and you developed a support system with his family and other people, and that clearly helped.
That did help, yes. But I didn't realize that I had this like underlying. There was a lot I had not worked on the subconscious level, and so over the years, I started developing a lot of health issues and food allergies, all of which, except maybe the tree nuts, I don't know. I haven't tried it. Though I eat all these kinds of foods that actually are exposed to tree nuts, and I don't have an issue. So I just have to test that last one. But I've
Hmm.
since reversed them. But it was interesting. It was like one by one, like I'd have an issue with the food. Oh, I remember a few weeks in a row that was like a new allergy each week.
Hmm.
And I didn't know that was because, I just wasn't, there was a lot I hadn't dealt with.
So it wasn't that you truly had, well, you did have allergies, but it wasn't that your body was rebelling to them. It was all dealing with the subconscious issues that you hadn't processed as a result of your boyfriend's passing and so on.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah. And just kind of went sideways like that.
How did you discover that it really was about what you weren't processing, and as a result, then you began to deal with it?
Um, well, I assumed that it had to have some kind of relation to how I was feeling, but I was assuming it was things that related to things that were happening in my life at that time. I
Hmm.
didn't realize it stemmed from that, trauma. Um, But what I did was, I mean, I did everything. I flew to Peru. I had a plant medicine retreat in the Amazon. And I flew to Belgrade from Montenegro to get a Tibetan energy healing from the only person in the Balkans who went through all the levels, the highest levels of training in Tibet. I did traditional Western medicine. I tried everything, and almost nothing moved the needle. I was on a vegan diet. I didn't have sugar for a few years. No sugar, no alcohol. Pretty much nothing was working, and I just was not looking very like. I look at pictures for myself during that time, and I look much younger now, and that's it's pretty surprising. But it's just like the stress was just accumulating.
Right.
But I kept trying everything. And when I moved to LA, things started speeding up. And I think that's because a new environment can be such a change for somebody. So they kind of like, you're kind of removed from your everyday stories of stress. And so that started speeding things up. And then I started realizing, oh my gosh, like I have these friendships that are seem to be designed to make me feel bad. And then I realized, oh, I have this victim mindset. And so I'm choosing people in my life who will help me affirm that mindset by helping me feel bad. And then I realized how that victim mindset, how it's all the way connected back to before Burrow passed away, but even worse after he passed away. It was like, how did this happen to me? Why did it happen to me? And so I started changing. The sooner I started realizing the reality of my world, the faster things started changing for me. And I started getting healthier. I started doing more advanced meditations, and I now eat almost everything I want, and I've never been healthier. But everything changed. Like, and my longtime friendships I've had for 10 years, 20 years, they're even better and stronger.
What made you decide to move to LA, and when did you do that?
So I had a friend who's from Montenegro, and she lived in LA for a couple of decades. So,
Mm.
but she was still summer in Montenegro. So, um, she she was coming back. You know, she was there one summer, and she was preparing to come back to LA in the fall. And she was like, I'd just gotten I was separated. I was getting a divorce, and I was already living alone for like a year. And she said, "Well, why are you here? Like, why don't you just come check out LA?" Because I was saying like I wanted to go back to the US. I just didn't know where. I wasn't going to go to Miami.
Yeah,
New York is too cold.
yeah.
So, and so she said, just come visit me for a couple of months, see what you think about it. Like, you work from home anywhere. And oddly enough, or not oddly, all of my clients at that time were based in LA. It was the strangest thing. Everything just evolved that way.
And
And so,
you caught up and you went to LA.
so I got up and went to LA. And it was funny because I came here to check it out to see if I wanted to move here. But it was the weirdest thing. I got off the plane and I was just like, okay. I just felt very like, I don't know, just
This could be
felt,
home.
yeah, yeah, feels easy. The energy feels aligned.
So you had mentioned you were divorced, so you had another relationship
I did,
and
yes.
got married, huh?
I did. I got married in Montenegro. That didn't work out, and not surprising after everything that happened. But yeah, you know, it's just another twist and turn in life.
Yeah. So you got divorced, so that means what, roughly 2016 or so, or 2017?
Um, so 2018, when
Oh,
I went
okay,
back to Montenegro to move, so I did the
okay,
official paperwork then. Yeah.
cool. All right. Well, so you moved to Los Angeles, and you were out here. So you were here when COVID hit.
Oh, was I? So I was here for a year, and thankfully I was out and about a lot during that year, playing like tourist and seeing everything. And then after that, it was kind of I kept joking about how I was seeing places I wanted to go in LA, but I actually was. I had a notebook and I was writing down places I wanted to go after lockdown. I was seeing them in movies and TV shows.
So obviously your copywriting business and all that you've done have survived, and you continue to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, before COVID, I actually did have a lot of luxury travel clients. And so that was like done in like in an instant. But yeah, it
Yeah.
really helped that I had multiple niches that I serve.
So when you got out here, have you developed any other kind of close relationships, another significant other in your life, or is it just you now?
It's just me at the moment.
Well, we have to ask, any dogs or cats?
No, no.
Oh, okay.
I wanted a toy poodle, but I travel a lot and I plan to travel it more. So
Yeah, that makes
they're
it
they're
hard.
really needy. Yeah.
Well, my blessing is, of course, I get to take my dog with me, but somebody does come and take care of Stitch the cat when I'm not here.
Uh,
And then every time I get home, I hear about it a lot because no matter how well she's taken care of, it isn't me. So she yells at me. She wants me to pet her a lot and so on. And I'm glad she does. She's going to be we think she'll be 16 in January. We rescued her in 2015. And our best guess and the guess
yeah.
of our vet is that she was 5 then. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
so she'll be 16 in January, and she does really well. And I enjoy her, and even though she yells at me a lot, clearly she enjoys me, so it works out.
Stitch.
Stitch. Well, that was what she was named when we rescued her. Um, and we had originally not thought we would have a cat for a while. We had a cat in the North Bay area in California when we lived there, and then he passed away in 2011. We moved down here in 2014 and in an apartment, and the people next door to us, the wife died in December of 2014, and the husband went to live in an assisted living facility, had no interest in the cat at all.
Hmm.
And we said we would find it a home because he had just told his caregiver and his sister, who were moving all of his furniture, to just take the cat to the pound. And we knew that wasn't going to be good for the cat's life expectancy. So we said we would find it a home. And then I asked what the cat's name was, and the cat's name was Stitch. And I knew that the cat was going to stay with us because Karen, my wife, had been a professional quilter ever since 1994. You think a quilter is going to give up a cat named Stitch? So we've had
Nope.
Stitch ever since. And Karen passed away in 2022, so we were married 40 years. So
Wow.
now it's me, Alamo the guide dog, and Stitch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it works out pretty well, but still, things happen. I never thought Karen was going to pass away, but it didn't happen instantly, so there was a little bit of time to prepare,
Mhm.
as opposed to it being like an overnight sort of thing. But still, it isn't fun.
Yeah.
But you move on. You well, not move on so much as in my case, I will not ever say I move on, but I move forward because I don't want to ever forget her. And I tell people
Mm.
all the time she's up there monitoring me from somewhere, and if I misbehave, I'm going to hear about it. So I got to be a good kid. People have heard me say that on this podcast before, but well, so among other things that you've done, Miss Copywriter, is that you eventually decided to write a book. Tell us about that. What brought that about and what the book is about and so on.
Yeah. Well, I'll hold it up for the camera. It's called Dream On: How to Create the New Life of Your Dreams After Upheaval or Loss. Um, a lot of people were telling me I should write a book after Bodo passed away, but I did not, and I'm glad I did not because it would have been a book written from a victim mindset standpoint, and it would not reflect the optimism and what I know today. So once life started changing, my health turned around completely, and I just started thriving. I realized one day, it was just like a flash of an insight. I suddenly understood that everything that was challenging for me in all of those years actually came back to, well, most of it, because most of it came back to that night, that morning. And that realization was, it was so shocking to me because I couldn't believe that I was carrying grief for so long, And because of that, I decided, because of that, I was thinking about like, what could I have done to bounce back faster? What was I not seeing that it was still going on in the background? And then shortly after that, maybe a few days later, I just had an insight like that, okay, I need to write a book, and this is the book, exactly how it's going to be. So I actually wrote the book pretty quickly, and with the exception of like a period of like, oh my gosh, I'm writing a book. I have to write this story. It was very, yeah, the vulnerability. I took a pause for a few months, but then when I got back to it, I was still writing it very quickly and wrapped, I would say in record time. The book wrote itself.
Well, it is interesting. I know that when the World Trade Center happened, I had no thought of writing a book, but the next year I was advised to write one. And I almost immediately thought of the way the book should be laid out, but I had no real knowledge about writing a book. And I took, as I tell people, almost 8 years of notes before I met Susie Flory, who was a writer who was writing a book about different dogs and things they've done. And she decided that she wanted to help. And I love collaboration. And so in 2010, we started writing it, and it just was the right time. So I know exactly what you're saying. You wrote it when it was the right time, and you were able to work through that. So how long did it actually take you to write it?
Um, well, I had those stops and starts, but certainly under a year.
Hmm.
Then there was the editing process. I got a good developmental editor and, went through those structural changes. Um, and I really got together a really great writing team. I enjoyed the whole process. The developmental editing process, working with, proofreader, the formatter, the book cover designer. It really turned into, um, it was a great experience. I'm looking forward to possibly doing that again in the future.
Well, I know that for me, we were very blessed. Our agent, Chip McGregor, who's now retired, got a contract with Thomas Nelson, that was the largest Christian publisher at the time. Now they're part of HarperCollins. But we too had a great team. They made suggestions, um, and they made it really clear that when they were making suggestions, they didn't want to change the book, but they wanted to enhance it. And they did. They only suggested things that really, as we put them into practice, and we both, when they would point things out to us, we both agreed, well, that was pretty obvious. Why didn't we think of that? And so we went through the same sort of thing, and we had a great team that helped us create a book that did get published in 2011. Um, in 2006, long before the book was actually going to be written, I had the last of 5 interviews with Larry King on his show, Larry King Live.
Wow.
And I asked Larry if he would write the foreword to the book when it came out, when we were ready to do it. And I could hardly get the words out before he said, absolutely, I want to write the foreword. And he did.
Wow.
So Larry King
Oh.
wrote the foreword to Thunderdog, and it came out, and it has been a number one New York Times bestseller in ebooks and so on. So it's been in great. And then we did with a friend of Susie's, I wrote a book for youth called Running with Roselle in
Oh.
late 2013. And it's more about me growing up and Roselle growing up and how we met than a World Trade Center book. But,
Uh-huh.
but then the pandemic hit, like with you, and what I decided to do was to write a book to deal with something that I realized I hadn't taught people about, namely, we fear so many things, and we fear things because we're always going, what if this, what if that, and we worry about all sorts of things over which we have absolutely no control, and it just builds fear up in us. So I decided I would write a book to try to teach people how they could learn to control fear and learn to use fear as a very powerful tool rather than letting it overwhelm, or as I would put it, blind you. And so
Mm.
um, we met Carrie Wyatt Ken, another friend of Susie's, and we started writing the book that became Live Like a Guide Dog, that was published last year by Tyndale House. And Tyndale, again, we had a great team that helped. And so Live Like a Guide Dog came out, and it is all about learning to control fear. And I use the lessons that I learned from working with 8 guide dogs, because in reality, dogs teach us a lot. And dogs don't have the fears that we do, because they tend to live in the moment. They live in what's
Mm.
going on now. They don't do what if about every single thing in the world. And they
Yeah.
don't worry about what they can't control, and we do. And so the book is all about trying to tell people to listen to that inner voice that they have, and to, in reality, learn that they can control fear. So it's a lot of fun. So I hear what you're
Oh,
saying.
I didn't know that that's what it's about. I'm gonna have to add that to my list.
I hope so. If you like it, and anyone else who goes and gets it, please, after you read it, give us a review on Amazon, because people love reviews in order
Yes,
to decide what books they want to read. So we're always looking for people to get the book and read it and then give us reviews. So,
you
but
got it.
so your book was published when?
July this year.
This year. Okay.
Hmm.
And so it was published by a publisher, or did you self-publish?
No, I self-published.
Okay.
Yeah. So I recruited that whole team I was talking
Right.
about.
Well, you had the contacts and the knowledge to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a lifelong writer, so that was great. I've just never written a book before, so in the development process, it was great getting that structural support. But it's a little bit of a different writing process in that, words are words are my daily reality.
Yeah. Well, did you face any kind of real fears or concerns when you were writing the book, or did it just seem so this is the right time that it came out?
I had just that like mindset, a mindset hurdle to overcome, which I did. When I initially like put it down, I put my manuscript down and I didn't touch it for months under the guise of having a full schedule, which was true, but I didn't need to put it down for that long. And then I realized what I was doing and I overcame it. But then I decided to share the intro to a friend. I have a screenwriter friend, now screenwriter director, and I wanted to share just that, initial piece of writing with him. And it was the first time I was showing anyone the book, and I was just surprised at like the physical reaction of knowing somebody's gonna be reading the book. It was quite terrifying to me. And his feedback was great. And then that was before I started working with the editors.
Hmm.
And that was it. So it was nice. Yeah, I think it's just like a thing we can't avoid sometimes. Sometimes that fear is there. It's new. It's so unknown. But the important thing is to not give up and to push through it. So now it's like that feels like a different person. I wouldn't have that fear again.
Yeah. Well, it's not new anymore. It's something you have experience about, and that's
Right.
pretty cool. Do you have any other books in you that are going to pop out at some point?
Um, I do. One of them I've since scrapped the idea, but then again, this book, the way it looked when I started writing it, it really morphed over time. So I don't know if it's gonna be the next book, but I do have a children's book idea that I would love to bring to life someday. So basically, dream on, but appropriate for children. So there would
Right.
not be any traumatizing story in the beginning, but just another book about a tool for helping them navigate everyday hurdles.
Yeah, we need a lot of that because the world is throwing throwing so many more hurdles at us in so many different ways. Anything we can do to help kids deal with that is extremely important because they're going to be the future dreamers that are going to make the world the place that it's going to become.
Yeah, and also with that being said, I think there's a lot that we can learn as adults from children.
Yeah.
And I moved. I just kind of see the deeper lessons there with how children live as time goes on, and I try and get back to that.
Well, and as I try to point out in Live Like a Guide Dog, there's an incredible amount that we can learn from dogs. People really underestimate when they have pets, their pets. They don't make them part of the family and develop the relationships they truly can, and they don't observe nearly as much and learn from the
Mm,
ways their animals behave. And there's so much that we can learn from them as we talk about in Live Like a Guide Dog. So
hmm.
I know what you're saying, and it's true for kids too. Kids don't look at things with a negative, stilted way that we do,
Right.
and they're curious, which is something that we tend to really weed out of people. We discourage
Mm,
true curiosity, which is so unfortunate.
right, right.
So I love curiosity. I think life's an adventure, and all we can do is live it and enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think that's available to all of us. It's just how much we allow ourselves to access that.
Yeah. What does joy mean to you?
I love the concept of joy. For years there were long periods of time when I would say I was happy, and I actually thought I was happy, and I was not. But I love joy because joy can't be it can't be faked, and it can't be misconstrued. If you're feeling joyful, you're feeling joyful. It's undeniable. We can talk ourselves into thinking we're feeling happy by making these like logical connections. But joy is like energized happiness. So it's like happiness with effervescence, with movement.
It's an interesting way to put it, energized happiness. And I think that joy can be all around us if we allow it. And it is a choice that we get to make and should make. We tend to look at things so often in such a negative way, and that doesn't help.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And dream on. It's really like that. Yes, it starts with that. difficult story, but it's really a lighthearted, not lighthearted, but an uplifting read. It's not
Yeah.
lighthearted. Sometimes I get, holding a mirror to my readers, but it's an uplifting read, and I think that's the most important goal of reading the book. It's about reconnecting to joy. That's really
Yeah.
it.
And that's an interesting way to put it, but I think that makes a lot of sense. And the fact is that joy is all around us if we will but take advantage of it. And we can do that. And I talk about not directly joy being uplifting and so on, but I do talk about the choices that we can make in our lives and live like a guide dog. I talk about choice in that sense and talk to people about how they can live a much more calm, productive, and peaceful life if they choose to do that. And as I said, I use lessons learned from 8 guide dogs to help. After the World Trade Center, we got home that night and I took Roselle's harness off. I was going to take her out. And she would have none of that. She ran off, grabbed her favorite boat-a-bone, tug-bone, and started playing tug-of-war with our retired guide dog who was living with us, Linny. She hadn't been out for 13 hours. Well, actually about 13 and a half hours. But she was too busy playing. And as I talked to people at Guide Dogs for the Blind later the next day, the veterinarian I spoke with, who was the head of their department, said, well, did anything actually threaten Roselle on September 11th? And I said, no, nothing directly threatened her. And he said, that's the answer, of course. She'll be fine because dogs don't do what if. I mean, we what if everything.
Mm.
And dogs don't do what if. So when the harness came off, work was done and she was ready to play. And that
Wow,
was all there was
that's
to it.
wonderful. Goals.
Yeah. Well, and she did. And she was perfectly fine ever since.
That's beautiful.
Well, so in your book, do you have exercises that people can do to help them deal with recovering or reclaiming joy or other things that you talk about with Dreaming On? And can you share one?
Yes, I have several in there. I will share. There's one that's called Pretend You're a Friend. And self-love was a huge component of turning everything around in my life. And I know it's, talking about the difference between adults and children. It's one of the sharp contrasts we have there. Young children love themselves unconditionally. Whereas adults, we tend to be our greatest critics. We tend to internalize everything. And even people who are, the best friends, family members, coworkers, they tend to have this dialogue that's just really challenging towards themselves. So this exercise, pretend you're a friend, is about I think like watching your inner dialogue and turning it around to address the situation in the way that you would to a good friend, or
Mm-hmm.
even the way that you live your life. So, for example, if you would never invite your friends to come stay with you, to have your house in a certain condition, why would you have it in a certain condition for you to live in every day? Why do you give yourself the short end of a stick? So it's turning everything around, looking at yourself objectively. And I don't think I included this aspect in the book, but what I do personally is what I did a lot before was I would just picture myself as a young child. I would think about myself as a 4-year-old, as a 5-year-old, and I would think like, would I talk to her like that? Because I'm still the same person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a hugely helpful kind of bridge for me to get there.
It's interesting. So you really put it in perspective and you'd say, would you treat your friend the way you treat yourself? And as you said, you're selling yourself short.
Absolutely. It's kind of, I was going to say it's ironic, but it's not ironic because it's just, as a society,
We
we've
just do
taught
that.
ourselves to cater to everyone else and to kind of shape and mold ourselves based on how we think other people want us to be. And we put ourselves last. But really,
Yeah.
there's nothing selfish about, cultivating true self-love. Like that's the kind of reservoir of strength, and wholeness that really ripples out when a person gets there. It improves everything, and it touches the lives of everyone around them.
You said something interesting. I want to go back to. You talked about the fact that you describe a lot of people, and you did it as I'm my own worst critic. And I did that for years. I always like to listen to the speeches that I give. And I said I always did it because I'm my own worst critic. If I can myself create something out of it and think about it and find something that needs to change, I should do that because I'm my own worst critic. And only over the last year or year and a half, I realized what a negative thing to say, and actually what an inappropriate thing to say. I read a passage once that said, the only person who can truly teach you anything is you. Other people can provide you with information, but you're the only one who can teach you. And so I now say I'm my own best teacher rather than my own worst critic. And it just mentally makes such a major paradigm mind shift in how you deal with so many things, because I am my own best teacher. And I love to listen to my own talks, and I love to listen to so many other things, but I also really use that just to take into account the mindset that as my own best teacher, I want to use every opportunity to learn that I can.
Oh, that's excellent. And the energy between those two phrases are vastly different too.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you just say them to yourself, you can feel the difference, the positive energy from my own best teacher, and it's a much better way to look at life.
Absolutely. Where the stories we tell ourselves, and especially the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, they have so much power. It's wild.
Yeah. What should someone do after an upheaval in their life, losing a loved one or whatever? What do you think the first step is that they should do? Here's a chance to really kind of maybe help people move forward who need to do that.
Yeah, well, if it's something, really, really challenging, like my example, um, I would say first resist the urge to fix anything or to change right away. It's important to just feel and have there's a time for grieving. Even if it's not something to that effect, it doesn't have to be losing someone. I've had friends who have suffered from, I think, four layoffs in the last couple of years. Just, um, everything deserves a period to grieve, and it's time for you to it's kind of like a time for you to let all the pieces fall into place. And then when you get to a place where you can be a little bit more objective about the situation, that's the time to, start taking action, whether that's like reading a book like mine and going through going through the steps that resonate with you most, or, starting a program like, EFT tapping and things like that, working on the subconscious ideas you've now absorbed, you've now internalized due to this thing that happened. But I think it's really important. I think as society, we love to fix things right away, and we want results like right now. And I think it's really important that obviously you want to recover from something difficult, but if you don't take the time to actually feel it, it's counterproductive.
And if you don't take the time to listen to yourself and really step back and take the time to heal properly, that's a problem. And you're right. We always just want to fix everything immediately. And that doesn't necessarily need to be the way it is. Um, if we listen to our inner selves and so on, we'll know what to do and when the right time is to do whatever has to be done.
Right. Yeah. I have a whole chapter about seeking silence.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm a big meditator. Obviously, I'm silent then, but I don't count that as the silent time. I mean, just time alone and not listening to music, not,
Yeah.
just time to sit there and listen, no matter how uncomfortable it is, because that's when you're finding the patterns. And when you're starting to feel better, that's also when you're getting these hits of intuition, deeper ideas. But I think, in this information age, we're kind of leaning heavily into absorbing outside information.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's so important every day to have a certain amount of time that it's just you and your inner whatever's happening.
Right, right. How did your book help you to create a personal branding program?
So this kind of just like organically came to me because a lot of these personal transformation techniques, well, let me back up. So right now, everyone's talking about the importance of having a personal brand, and that's important. But what I'm noticing is that a lot of the focus is on the superficial aspects. And I think the best personal branding advice in the world will not take a person very far if they're not connected to who they really are, because then that's a brand built on a house of cards. So I came up with this idea to help clients uncover more of who they really are and then help them get comfortable with infusing elements of that into their positioning, into their messaging. And so what this does is it brings greater authenticity to, to both in their personal lives and their professional lives. It makes them more memorable. It helps people keep them top of mind when opportunities pop up. And I think that's a really important element. I think there's a heavy focus on just following best practices and, post this many times a day, et cetera, et cetera. But the most magnetic people, it's really that because they've taken the initiative to really show who they are as people, which won't necessarily resonate with everyone, but that's not the point.
Nope.
It's not to, but it really, really, really speaks to the people who it does attract.
Right. Do you think you're living the life of your dreams?
I am definitely living a version of the life of my dreams, and that version my vision of a dream life continues to evolve over time. But I was sure to include that in my book, so no one's thinking like, well, what do you mean? Have you created your dream life? I definitely did, and I have to say my dream life has evolved so much further, even from when I wrote those words. So from one year to the next. And I'm excited for, I'm very grateful about the stage of my life, but I'm also excited to see, where it goes next.
Yeah. And that's what's so fun is to think about that. Excited to see what happens next, looking forward to it and treating life as the adventure it really is. It's not a bad thing at all.
No, it's not. And you know what? I'm one of those people, I wake up with a smile on my face. I am so happy. And it was not like that for a long time. And I have to say, every day is a gift. And, that's something people say a lot. But it really is true. And, it's just been an honor to be able to write this book and to know I've already heard from people who it's helped them, that it's reached them at the right time, or it's not something that they necessarily needed now, but they read it and they loved it and they shared with a friend who lost a loved one recently, or, who lost a job. And I think it's important because there's always so many reasons to feel joy and to be grateful. And there's also a lot of challenges in life, but anything that can remind us of what we have, I think is always a good thing.
If people want to get a copy of the book, how do they do that?
It's available in all formats. It's on Amazon, Apple Books, Audible.
Cool. Okay. So it's everywhere.
Yeah, basically.
So with your personal branding program and all the other things, I'm assuming you teach that, or you're willing to teach that to other people?
Yes, I do offer one-on-one 3-month engagements, and I'm developing a self-guided course counterpart for anyone who wants to do this on their own.
So how do people reach out to you?
Yeah, they can visit my website. It's just my first name and my last name. So chanoainez.com.
Can you spell, please?
Yes, ChanoaInez.com.
.com. And we all know that com is spelled C-O-M, so there.
Yeah.
Well, Chanoa, I want to thank you for being here. I hope that people have gained a lot out of this, and I hope that people will reach out to you. I've learned a lot. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate the time of all of you who have been listening or watching the podcast today. I hope that you will take to heart all the things that Chanoa had to say. I think a lot of great lessons here, and I'm sure that you'll find that if you take some of these to heart, it'll be a good thing in your life. So we'd love you to comment. I would appreciate hearing from you. You can reach me at Michael, Michaelhi at Accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com. Please, wherever you're observing us, give us a 5-star rating, and especially please give us a review. We really value your podcast reviews. If you know anyone who ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, Chanoa, including you, if you know anyone, please introduce us. We're always looking for more people to come on and tell their stories. But again, Chanoa, I want to thank you for being here. This has been absolutely wonderful, enjoyable, and fun, which is, of course, part of the issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.